The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the small diner, curling in warm waves around the booths as people chatted, clinked forks, and went on with their evenings. It was the kind of place where the lights were soft, the menus old, and the regulars sat at the counter with stories as worn as the stools they balanced on. James liked it here. He came almost every Wednesday after a long shift at the hardware store, looking for nothing more than a meal, quiet, and the faint comfort of routine. Tonight was no different, at least, that's what he thought. He sat near the back, close enough to the window to see the glow of streetlights, far enough from the door to avoid the cold wind each time someone walked in. He had just taken his first bite of mashed potatoes when a faint, hurried whisper floated from the booth behind him. "Sit tight, baby, Mommy's thinking." The voice was soft, gentle, stretched thin with exhaustion. He wouldn't have even noticed it if not for what came next, a tiny sigh. The quiet, empty kind that only children made when they were tired, hungry, and trying not to complain. James turned slightly, just enough to glance over his shoulder without being obvious. A woman in a faded blue coat sat in the booth behind him. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, her eyes shadowed as though sleep had been avoiding her for days. Opposite her sat a little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, with big brown eyes, tangled hair, and a pair of hands folded tightly on the table like she was trying hard to behave. There was no food on their table. Not a plate, not a drink, not even a menu anymore. The waitress had walked by earlier, offering a friendly smile and a notepad, but the mother had waved her off politely. James saw the gesture. A quick shake of the head, a small smile that tried too hard, and a whispered, "We're just deciding, thank you." But time had passed, and nothing changed. The child's gaze drifted around the diner, following the movement of plates and trays. Watching fries, burgers, steaming soups pass by. Watching couples laugh. Watching other children dig into dessert. Then the girl's eyes paused, on him. More specifically, on the roasted chicken sitting on his plate. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't lean forward or reach or stare rudely. She simply looked, in that innocent, almost guilty way children did when something smelled good but they knew they weren't supposed to want it. He tried to look away. He really did. It felt intrusive to keep glancing back. But every time he shifted in his seat or cut into his dinner, he felt those eyes, soft, unsure, hungry, fixed on his plate. The mother noticed, finally. She stiffened, placed her hand on the girl's, and whispered something too quiet for him to hear. The child dropped her gaze immediately, staring at her lap, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Then the woman stood abruptly, pulling her coat around her as if she were suddenly cold. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "Let's go." Her voice trembled on the last word. The little girl hesitated, not dramatically, not in protest. It was more like a tiny pause, but I'm still hungry, pause, before she slid out of the booth and reached for her mother's hand. They began walking toward the door. That should have been the end of it. People came and left diners all the time. Strangers passed without their stories ever touching. But something hit James then, like a hand pressing firmly against his chest. Not pity, not guilt, something deeper, something familiar. Because many years ago, that was him. A single mother, an empty plate, a fake smile, a hungry child pretending not to be. Before he realized it, his hand shot into the air. Excuse me." He didn't even know why he said it that loudly. The woman froze. Her daughter looked up at her, confused, as though she wasn't sure if they were in trouble. The mother turned slowly, pulling her daughter gently behind her leg. "Yes." James stood awkwardly beside his table, heart pounding harder than necessary. "Sorry," he said, scratching the back of his neck. I couldn't help noticing, you two were leaving without eating." Her face flushed red immediately, an embarrassed, wounded shade. "Oh, no, we're fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "We're just in a bit of a hurry." The lie tasted heavy in the air. James swallowed. Then he pointed at his plate, his voice softer now. "Your little girl," she kept glancing at my food. The woman's jaw tightened. Her shoulders rose in silent defense. "She didn't mean to bother you," she said, her voice clipped, fragile. "She knows better." "I'm sorry. She wasn't bothering me," he answered gently. "I didn't mean it like that." For a moment, the woman looked everywhere except at him, at the floor, the door, her daughter's shoes, the window fogged with warm breath. Then she whispered, "We really need to go." She grabbed her daughter's hand again. But the girl tugged back, not hard, not rebellious, just a slight, tiny pull. Enough for the mother to pause. "Mommy," the girl whispered, "my tummy hurts." The mother closed her eyes. Only for a second, but it was enough for the truth to spill out between them. Something inside James cracked. "Let me buy you both dinner," he said quietly. The mother's eyes flew open, wide, alarmed. "No, no, we can't accept that. You're a stranger. It wouldn't be right." He nodded slowly. "I understand, but it also wouldn't be right for you two to leave hungry." "We'll be okay," she insisted, her voice barely holding together. He softened his tone even more. "Please, let me, not because you owe me anything. Not because I feel sorry for you. But because I know what it feels like." The mother blinked, confused. "Feels like what?" "To be a kid staring at someone else's plate," he said, voice rough. "And to be a parent trying to pretend everything's fine." The woman's lips parted, then closed again. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away quickly, stubbornly. "We've had a rough week," she whispered finally. "But we're okay, really." The girl looked up at her mother with quiet hope. James stepped back, giving them space. "At least sit back down. If not for dinner, then for a warm drink. It's cold outside." Her gaze flicked to the window, where frost was crawling along the edges like tiny silver trails. She exhaled slowly, bending down to her daughter. "Do you want to stay for a hot chocolate?" she asked softly. The girl nodded. Very small, very shy. The mother swallowed hard and turned to James. "Okay," she whispered, "but just a drink, nothing else." He smiled. "One step at a time." The waitress came by moments later, cheerful as always. James waved her over. "Put whatever they want on my bill," he said. The mother tried to protest, but the waitress smiled knowingly and gently redirected her back into the booth. "What's your name?" the little girl asked suddenly, peeking over the table. "James," he said. "What's yours?" "Lila." "That's a beautiful name," she giggled softly, hiding her face behind her hands. The mother finally spoke. "I'm Sarah. Thank you for this." "Really?" He nodded. "Of course." But when the waitress returned and asked what they'd like, Sarah opened the menu only long enough to say, "Just one hot chocolate for my daughter, thank you." But James noticed her looking at the pictures, her eyes lingering on soups, sandwiches, anything warm. The way hunger lingered around her was quieter, more patient than her daughter's, but just as real. When the waitress left, he leaned slightly forward. "You haven't eaten either." "I'll be fine," she said. "Mothers get used to skipping meals. Doesn't mean they should." She looked down. Her fingers twisted in her lap. "Please don't make me feel ashamed," she whispered. He froze. "I promise you, I'm not." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversations around them. Then the hot chocolate arrived, and little Lila's eyes lit up like a tiny firework. She cupped the mug carefully, blowing on the steam as if it were a treasure. The sight of her joy was too genuine, too pure, and too sad. American diners weren't supposed to hold stories like this. They were supposed to hold dates, office lunches, late-night milkshakes. But sometimes they held the unspoken hardships people carried quietly through life. Sarah finally relaxed a little, sipping warm water the waitress had brought her. Her hands wrapped around the cup as if she were trying to absorb heat into her bones. "You said you knew what it feels like," she said after a while. "What did you mean?" James hesitated. "My mother was alone," he said. "She tried hard, but there were days we had nothing. I used to pretend I wasn't hungry so she wouldn't worry. And she used to pretend she wasn't hungry so I wouldn't worry." Sarah stared at him slowly, softly, empathetically. "That sounds familiar," she whispered. He nodded. "I thought so." She studied him then, like she was trying to understand why a stranger cared enough to intervene. "How long have you been struggling?" he asked gently. She sighed, the kind of sigh that seemed to carry weeks, months, maybe years of weight. "I lost my job 3 weeks ago," she said quietly. "Savings ran out faster than I expected. Rent is overdue, and I've been trying to make everything look normal for her. She's lucky to have you," he said. "I'm supposed to make sure she doesn't go hungry," she murmured. "But tonight, I couldn't even buy her dinner. I told her we'd already eaten. But when she smelled the food," her voice cracked, "she couldn't help it." James swallowed hard. "You're doing your best. That counts for something." "Sometimes," she whispered, "it doesn't feel like enough." The waitress arrived again, and this time, she placed 2 full meals on the table in front of Sarah and Lila. Sarah's eyes widened. "We didn't order this." "I did," James said simply. "No," she said, shaking her head quickly. I can't let you. It's already done, he said gently. Please, eat. She stared at the plate, at the warm chicken, the vegetables, the mashed potatoes. She hadn't touched real food in God knows how long. Her hands trembled around the fork. Then she broke, silently, subtly, but undeniably. A tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "Thank you." Lila dug in immediately, but politely, small bites, careful chews, as though she didn't want the food to disappear too quickly. Sarah ate more slowly, with gratitude, with disbelief, with necessity. James returned to his table but stayed close, letting them eat in peace. Half an hour later, the plates were empty. The little girl was smiling in that sleepy, full-stomach way that only children could. Sarah looked healthier, still tired, still stressed, but like someone who had been given the first breath after drowning. When they stood to leave, Sarah approached him. I don't know how to repay you, she said. You don't have to. I want to, she insisted softly. Someday, he shrugged gently. Then someday, help someone else who needs it. She smiled, small, real, warm. That, she said, I can do. Lila reached into her coat pocket, fished around, and pulled out a little pink hair clip shaped like a butterfly. It was old, chipped at the edges, clearly loved. She walked up to James and held it out. This is for you, she said shyly. James blinked in surprise. That's your hair clip. It's my favorite, she whispered. But Mommy says when someone is kind to you, you should give them something you love. His throat tightened. He knelt so he was eye level with her. Thank you, he said, accepting it gently. I'll take good care of it. She beamed. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. Come on, sweetheart, let's head home. As they turned toward the door, Sarah looked back one last time. Some people pretend to look away, she said softly. But you didn't. Thank you for that. James smiled. Take care of yourselves. Then they walked out into the cold night, the mother's arm wrapped around her daughter, their silhouettes small but strong under the streetlight. James remained at the table long after they disappeared from view. The butterfly clip sat in his palm, light, childlike, priceless. And he knew, deep down, that something quiet and powerful had shifted inside him. Not because he'd bought a meal, but because he remembered what it felt like to be hungry, and chose not to pretend he didn't see it in someone else. And sometimes, that was enough to change someone's entire night, maybe even their life.